Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking time out to join today's FinTech seminar. This is Bernia from the HKMA's FinTech Facilitation Office, and I'm your host for today. Pleased to meet you all. First of all, on behalf of the HKMA, I'd like to thank the Hong Kong Association of Banks for organizing today's event. We're extremely glad to know that more than 300 participants from 75 member banks have registered. And in fact, as I speak, we have more than 150 participants online already. So once again, thank you for making time to join us this afternoon. Today, we're very honored to have Ms. Diana Cesar, Chairperson of HKAB, and Mr. Eddie Yu, Chief Executive of the HKMA, join us for this industry-exclusive FinTech event. Today's program is divided into two sessions. In the first half of the program, Eddie will give a speech and share with us HKMA's new exciting FinTech strategy. The second half will feature a fireside chat, and Eddie and Diana will discuss in greater detail everything you want to know more about. After that, there will be a question and answer session. More on that later. So without any further delay, please welcome Eddie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking out the time to attend this HKAB FinTech seminar. And I'm glad to be able to meet all of you online via this live stream. I would like to take this opportunity to first thank the HKAB for organizing the event and also for inviting me to speak. Today, it gives me great pleasure to share with you the HKMA's new FinTech strategy that we call FinTech 2025. It's commonly accepted that the future of banking hinges on technology. The quality of any banking experience will, in today's time, be very much correlated to how much of that experience is digital. And banks in Hong Kong were early movers in Asia. We embraced digitalization long before FinTech came into the limelight. You have truly done a great job in using technology to streamline your bank's operation and also to provide excellent customer experience. The FinTech 2025 strategy that we are announcing today aspires to help the financial sector adopt technology comprehensively by 2025, so that they will deliver fair and efficient financial services, benefiting both Hong Kong people and the Hong Kong economy. And we believe that this new FinTech strategy will provide the shot in the arm to elevate our banking industry to new heights. Before I get more deeply into the strategy, let's have a look at where we currently stand. Just last year, all the 8 virtual banks have already launched their services to the public, marking a key milestone in Hong Kong's FinTech journey. And the usage of our faster payment system has witnessed substantial growth since the launch. And so far, it has recorded over 8 million registrations, and it is used by the general public in P2P payments, government payments, and also payments to merchants. On average, more than 630,000 transactions are conducted daily, more than twofold compared with a year ago. Our FinTech Supervisory Sandbox was also well received, and we've got more than 200 initiatives being tested since its launch. These encouraging figures show how the HKMA's smart banking initiative have significantly driven the digital transformation of banking services. And they also demonstrate Hong Kong people's willingness to embrace FinTech and also set us up for further FinTech developments. Unfortunately, the city and the world were subsequently battered by COVID. But Hong Kong's pre-pandemic FinTech efforts were sufficient for the time being at least, so that we were able to enjoy largely uninterrupted high-quality digital financial services even during the pandemic, allowing a wide range of commercial activities to continue in the city. In fact, COVID demonstrated the sheer power of FinTech. fintech can fulfill gaps when traditional banking services are compromised. Now, we must recognize and accept the fact that COVID has permanently changed customers' behavior. Their digital appetite will outlast the pandemic for sure. And the only way to satisfy their increasing digital appetite is to increase our fintech offerings, which in turn will make them hungrier for more. The HKMA believes that now is the right time for the banking industry to double down on fintech development. It's time to work together as a whole to embrace the numerous untapped possibilities that fintech can bring. Fintech has the potential to become a major economic growth engine in the post-pandemic era. And it would be in the banking industry's best interest to be a part of this progression. And with this in mind, we've talked to a lot of stakeholders in the past few months just to map out what exactly needs to be done to take our fintech development to the next high level. Our conclusion is that we must build an ecosystem where the value of fintech is experienced across all levels and by all groups of people. When we bring sufficient benefits to customers, investors, and also the public at large, we will create a virtuous cycle that generates even more demand for fintech solutions, which in turn will energize the whole industry. And as we build this ecosystem, we also need to ensure that we maintain the right factors for the ecosystem to grow further. Data, infrastructure, talent, and funding will all be vital to this growth. And this thinking process has culminated in a strategy that we now call Fintech 2025. And I'm pleased to share with you here. And in order that you can remember the initiative much easier, we've grouped them into what we call BCDEF, as you can see on the screen. The first part of our fintech strategy is called All Banks Go Fintech. In short, we want banks, big or small, to go all in with fintech and fully digitalize their operations from front end all the way into the back end. The future is full of uncertainties, and this is something that we have all witnessed firsthand in the last 2 years with the pandemic. Challenges and interruptions to day-to-day activities, including banking activities, can just happen unannounced. The only thing certain, and that has been constant throughout these ups and downs, is digitalization. Indeed, the banking industry also recognizes the value of digitalization. At least would like to think that this is why banks have so positively embraced the Hong Kong MA's fintech drive so far, instead of really us applying any regulatory pressure. But jokes aside, I trust the figures that I quoted earlier are proof that our earlier smart banking initiative have laid a strong foundation for our banks to take this next step in their fintech journey. The HKMA is keen to support banks during this process. Under the Fintech 2025 strategy, we will be rolling out a tech baseline assessment to help the HKMA identify those areas that we may be able to offer support. As part of this exercise, we will be inviting banks to submit a 3-year plan for technology adoption within Q4 2021. We will then assess and benchmark the results against overseas peers to identify whether there are, firstly, any business areas, whether you're talking about invest tech, wealth tech, insure tech, or green tech, where technology is underused. Or secondly, whether there are any specific technology types, whether you're talking about artificial intelligence or blockchain, that are not receiving sufficient attention. And based on the findings of this exercise, we will consider what support the HKMA can offer to help the banking sector reach the next level of fintech sophistication. And if everything goes according to plan, you can expect to see the results in the first half of 2022. In parallel, we will continue to provide guidance on fintech areas that may present opportunities or risk management challenges to the banking industry. This will help banks adopt novel technologies with more confidence and less apprehension that some of my colleagues, especially on the regulatory side, may come knocking on your door. As an example, as part of our 2-year Regtech roadmap, we will soon be publishing a Regtech Adoption Practice Guide series to address how Regtech solutions can be applied to cloud computing, blockchain, or anti-money laundering surveillance. Despite this promise of support, we recognize that banks, especially the smaller ones, may still have doubts about going all in with fintech, given the heavy talent and also resource investments required. However, we are confident that by offering the right support that is targeted, specific to the local market circumstances and where it's needed, banks of all sizes will soon grow to appreciate the case for going fintech. The HKMA looks forward to being a long-term partner with you on this journey, and I hope that you can offer us your unwavering support as well. As we look beyond banks to the wider financial system, we turn our attention to initiatives that will have an impact on the financial system as a whole, one of which is CBDCs, which is the focus of our second strategy. As the world becomes more interconnected than ever, cross-border and cross-boundary transactions have never been more frequent. Many of us have witnessed how payment instruments have evolved over time, from banknotes to credit cards to cross-border payment networks. While CBDCs may not see mainstream adoption anytime soon, this is something that has the potential to profoundly alter the global payment landscape. We must work with the industry and international community to ensure that we address both the technical and non-technical issues involved. For this reason, we have been researching wholesale CBDCs as they have great potential in addressing the long-standing pain points in cross-border payments. And lately, the HKMA's joint research with the Bank of Thailand has in fact been ranked by the market as one of the most mature of its kind in the world, a testimony that we stand at the forefront in the realm of wholesale CBDCs. We recently expanded the scale of the project to include even more participating jurisdictions. And some of you may already be aware that the HKMA has begun researching retail CBDCs, or simply RCBDCs. We have been working with the Bank for International Settlements Innovation Hub Hong Kong Center on a project called Project Aurum, which will focus on the technical aspects of issuing RCBDC and the possible architectural designs. Similar to the majority of central banks, we see that a lot of issues need to be thought through before issuing RCBDC. For instance, how should we strike a right balance between privacy and traceability? And how do we mitigate cybersecurity risks? How will it affect the effectiveness of monetary transmission? These are all important questions that need to be answered before reaching a conclusion. Against this background, the HKMA will soon begin a comprehensive study on e-Hong Kong dollar to understand its use case, benefits, and also related risks. This is to increase our technical readiness so that we are prepared for all kinds of circumstances in the future, including the potential for Hong Kong to issue e-Hong Kong dollar. We have already established an internal cross-departmental working group within the HKMA to study the relevant technical, policy, and also legal issues. And we hope to offer our initial thoughts on this complex matter in 12 months' time. Needless to say, CBDC will remain one of the most important topics among the global central banking community in the months or even years to come. The HKMA will continue to work with the BIS and other international institutions to prepare Hong Kong for this evolving landscape. Our first strategy is to create a high-performing and functional data infrastructure so that banks can benefit from data instead of being weighed down by it. We often hear comments that the lack of data has been a major impediment to banks' competition with the big tech companies. But the reality is that a lot of data is scattered across different sectors, entities, and platforms. It's just that there's no efficient way for traditional financial institutions like banks to tap into these treasure troves with the consent of the data subjects where necessary. In order to leverage data to launch innovative financial solutions and also to unleash the city's potential for the next generation of banking, we need to enhance Hong Kong's financial data infrastructure. For example, as a start, we are building the Commercial Data Interchange, or CDI. After joining CDI, you will be able to safely and quickly access corporate data, which, although always there, was previously almost inaccessible. And what's more, once the CDI has been built and related mechanisms established, your bank can connect with new data providers with minimal efforts. The need for customizing connectivity for each partner will become the thing of the past. In many ways, CDI is unlike our existing financial infrastructure, such as the RTGS or the FPS. For one thing, the architecture of CDI is more complex. Multiple parties are involved. Here, you're talking about banks, data providers, commercial entities, government departments, you name it. And for another, we need to factor in various considerations to keep up with the latest international standards, including measures to uphold and protect data privacy. Therefore, enhancing the financial data infrastructure must be a concerted effort by the banking and tech industry as a whole. A team effort will ultimately lead to public goods that deliver value, benefit all the parties, and at the same time are commercially viable. By improving our data infrastructure, we are empowering the industry and encouraging creativity for developing innovative financial products and solutions. In turn, building up the overall appetite for fintech solutions. The three strategies that I just mentioned will hopefully generate demand in the industry for fintech solutions. However, from what we learned from the industry, the supply of fintech talent remains a pressing issue. Therefore, our fourth strategy is that we want to foster a fintech-savvy workforce and nurture all-round fintech talents, including students and also practitioners. We don't need reminding of how Hong Kong boasts an extremely strong talent pool, be it in law, finance, accountancy, or other professions. We are a city that thrives on our people's high agility and efficiency. We pride ourselves on keeping up with international standards, as well as customer and market requirements. With fintech being a relatively new area, it's understandable that we currently are facing quite an acute fintech talent shortage. Hong Kong is in need of grooming all-round fintech talent and expertise. We need professionals who can develop fintech solutions instead of merely being users of it. Given the intellect and work ethics of our students and professionals, I am confident that this is an objective that we can achieve without difficulties. As mentioned, fintech is, comparatively speaking, a nascent industry. And that's why insights about the industry, such as the kinds of jobs available, the skill sets required, and career path, remains largely a mystery to outsiders, let alone fresh graduates or new joiners. We want to help those newcomers gain industry knowledge and practical industry experience. Of course, we have not forgotten about existing banking practitioners. It's equally important, if not more, to upskill practitioners and deepen their fintech knowledge. In order to do this, we have joined hands with the industry and local universities to launch a new project called the Industry Project Masters Network Scheme. Starting from September this year, month-long internship opportunities will be provided to some master's students for them to gain hands-on experience in areas like AI or federated learning. By the end of this year, we will also launch a new FinTech module for the enhanced competency framework to raise the professional competencies of the existing banking practitioners. A collective effort with the banking industry, as well as our strategic partners, will enable us to nurture homegrown FinTech talent and maintain our competitive edge as an international financial center. We understand that good ideas alone will not come to fruition without either one of the following: funding support and a conducive environment that allows mistakes and failures. In fact, numerous success stories in history prove that trial and error is necessary for innovation. To encourage banks to try more, in turn stimulating innovation in the banking industry, we are going to channel our focus on two areas: funding and policies. And today, I'm excited to announce that the HKMA is doing preparation work to further upgrade our FinTech Supervisory Sandbox. To begin with, we are exploring the possibility of providing funding support to qualified FinTech projects. Our discussion with the Innovation and Technology Commission has just started, and I hope to share more details with you in due course. We hope the enhanced sandbox could speed up the launch of innovative financial products and solutions, and ultimately reducing their time to market and facilitate banks in making commercial gains while serving the public. To ensure that no banks, regardless of their size, will be left behind in this cascading wave of innovation, the HKMA will join forces with our strategic partners, including the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks and Cyberport, to introduce utilities and necessary support to banks to speed up their technology adoption. Through supportive measures, we want to foster an encouraging environment in which all stakeholders, be they banks, non-banks, or the academia, can trust and flourish. As a takeaway, when you think about the FinTech 2025 strategy, I want you to envision a virtuous cycle. As all banks adopt FinTech to capture new opportunities in the digital economy, strong demands will be created for FinTech talent, data infrastructure, new payment instruments, and supportive policies. Our strategy will meet all these demands, which in turn will further reinforce FinTech adoption and ultimately catalyze the growth of a healthy FinTech ecosystem that benefits both banks and customers. Back in 2017, 4 years ago, when the HKMA announced the 7 Smart Banking Initiative, they were all well received, though not everyone could tell their significance at the time and the changes that they could bring. Today, nobody will question the impact of, for example, the FPS or virtual banks on your business and our daily lives. And I believe the same could be said for FinTech 2025. This new forward-thinking strategy will set the scene for important FinTech developments to take place in the coming years. And I urge you to join us and take our city's FinTech ecosystem to new heights. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you're all keen to understand the new initiatives in greater detail. Next, in this fireside chat, Eddie and Diana are going to openly and honestly discuss the strategy and show us how it's going to level up the banking industry. There will be a question and answer session after this, and you're welcome to post your questions in the chat box anytime starting from now. Your questions will not be visible to other participants, and Eddie will endeavor to answer as many questions as possible. So, Eddie and Diana, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Eddie.
Afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to this afternoon's HKAB FinTech seminar. We have over 220 colleagues from the industry already joining us. So thank you, Eddie, for this opportunity to speak to us face to face. When it comes to FinTech developments, my view is that Hong Kong is already on the forefront. of the global fintech scene. Under guidance from HKMA, the industry has introduced many new digital services in recent years, promoting constructive competition and fostering financial inclusion that benefit customers directly. I think that ultimately is the key vision taking us forward. The adoption of AI and data analytics in the banking operations, the use of regulatory technology or Regtech in compliance, and the need for enhanced cybersecurity are high on our agenda. But there certainly is a case to accelerate change. COVID is fundamentally changing the way people live and businesses work. And over the longer term, technological disruption will reshape the ways in which we cannot fully imagine as yet. Eddie, now you shared your expectations in an article last week that post-pandemic competition amongst countries and among cities will only become ever more intense. This leads me to my first question. Is this the foresight, the driving force behind the HKMA's FinTech 2025 strategy? And how will this new strategy complement the 7 smart banking initiatives announced earlier in 2017?
Well, thanks, Diana. It's a very good question. If you look back at what we did back in 2017, it's very clear from the 7 smart banking initiative that we've been aiming at fostering a progressive fintech ecosystem in Hong Kong. I have to say that when we launched the smart banking initiative back 4 years ago, we really didn't see a lot of fintech in Hong Kong. But after the rollout of those measures, I'll have to say that we have taken a very big leap in our ecosystem and also in the global recognition of our thriving fintech developments. Some of the areas, the projects are very well used by the public. I think the most popular one has to be the faster payment system. When we now already have 8 million registration out of a population of just 7.5 million, I think we have probably the fastest and highest penetration rate among different faster payment systems in the world. Virtual banks as well. They've all been launching with some quite interesting new product ideas, serving the underserved, also helping us in some ways to relieving the needs of the underserved. Financial inclusion partly has been achieved. So coming into now, as you said, I thought the pandemic is actually one big accelerator of 2 major macro trends. One is green that we can talk about another day. The other is the use of technology, in particular fintech. So I think now is about the right time. Now that our 7 smart banking initiatives have mostly been rolled out, now is the right time to think about what are we going to do in terms of our fintech developments, in terms of our strategy for the next 4 or 5 years. And that's why we conducted this review. And we also thought that now is the right time to do that because pandemic has changed the habits of our many people in shopping, in paying, in how they manage their personal finances. It's a lot more digitized. And this trend will not be reversed. Even for post-pandemic period, I do see that now that we're so used to having digital finance, the need for even more innovative fintech products will continue. And there will be a pressure for banks to deliver. So I think it will be a good time for us to think about, as a whole for Hong Kong, what should be our strategy. The other reason or driving force for FinTech 2025 strategy is, like you said, post-pandemic, I think the competition, one is that technology has to be one of the driving force for productivity and also efficiency. And the competition between different financial centers will continue to be intense. And whether you have a good grasp and application of technology will define how well you compete in this new world. And that's actually what drives us to come about with this strategy. And I hope that the banking sector will join us in the implementation of this forward-looking strategy.
Great, thanks, Eddie. Now, can you please elaborate for us what is at the core of the new FinTech 2025 strategy? And how would you envisage the banking industry and customers to benefit from it?
Right. The FinTech 2025 strategy is a bit different from the 7 Smart Banking Initiative. When we first introduced those initiatives, it's almost from a lack of technology support in banking to some projects, which are very visible and sort of gets through to every household. But for this round, we're really thinking about more general policies or strategies that we should undertake for the next 4 or 5 years. And 2 are at the center. The first is all banks go FinTech. This is quite important in that we're really talking about all banks, large or small. Because if you look at the banking sector in Hong Kong, maybe the larger global banks has already been taking FinTech to quite an advanced level. But many of our medium-sized or smaller banks may not be doing that in the same pace. What we really want to do is to really encourage all our banks to adopt digital applications in their operations, because with the ongoing digitalization of the sector, if you don't move ahead, you will be left behind. And in this process, whether there's anything the HKMA or the FinTech industry in Hong Kong can do to support these developments, we are happy to look into it. But first, we need to look at where everybody is. And that's where the tech baseline assessment comes into play. We want to see what technologies banks are adopting, what stage they're in. Are there areas that I just mentioned in my speech, wealth tech, insurtech, that's been underused? If we want to bring more of these applications to Hong Kong, how can we do that? For smaller banks, is it possible that we can work with our partners like the Hong Kong Science Park to see whether we can, or S3, to see whether we can develop some type of utilities package that the smaller banks can just take it off the shelf and customize and use it. So this is the first thing I think is important, to bring all banks into our digital journey, not just the more sort of tech-savvy banks. The second focus is on data. Data, we still believe that it will be at the center of future banking product development. And as I mentioned again, now data is scattered around, but what we want to do in future is that if the data subjects, whether you're talking about individual corporates or SMEs, if they provide the necessary consents for them to retrieve their data for the use by the financial institutions, that can be done in an efficient and very cheap and fast way. So that riding on this efficient platform of data, we will first start with SMEs. Banks can actually, one, use alternative data for them in many of their operations, like credit scoring, and secondly, develop innovative products. So we're actually quite focused on developing data infrastructure. Of course, what you will see in the media tomorrow probably is a lot more focused on the first thing, which is Cbdc, where we are doing a study. But in terms of your question, which is what benefits will the strategy bring to banks and also customers, I thought the first 2 initiatives, all banks go FinTech and data, will actually be very applicable.
Thank you, Eddie. Let me start by reassuring you that our views are perfectly aligned. HKAB has been a keen supporter of Hong Kong's FinTech development, and we stand ready to support the HKMA's FinTech 2025 strategy. Technology is certainly playing a bigger role than ever, and we all recognize that there is no lack of desire at all in enabling new business opportunity, boosting operational resiliency, and on top of efficiency, actually supporting the interface between banks and regulators. Over the past few years, HKAB has been working very closely with regulators like yourselves, government departments, stakeholders, and partners to drive FinTech adoption For example, and I think you also quoted this, since the HKMA's introduction of the Smart Banking initiatives in 2017, we have established dedicated work groups to drive initiatives such as the faster payment system, which we all are very proud of, and open API, as well as virtual banking. I'd say banks in Hong Kong readily embrace technology, recognizing it poses opportunities and not just threats to the banking operation. This leads me to my next question. You mentioned all banks go fintech. Can you please tell us what it means by all banks go fintech? And what is the scope of the tech baseline assessment? And how should the industry prepare for this?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, all banks go fintech really is just a statement to encourage all banks, large or small, to embrace and also use technology for your operations, whether it's front end, mid office, or back office. But first, we need to look at where banks stand currently in the use of technology. And that's why we will be introducing this tech baseline assessment. Basically, we will want to know where, to what extent banks are adopting technology, assess whether there are impediments for the use of wealth tech, insurtech, or green tech, and then see what support we can give them. In terms of the timeline, we are thinking about issuing communications to banks very quickly in July. You will see another circular from us, which will request the banks to submit a 3-year plan on how they intend to adopt fintech adoption for the next 3 years. And we expect the banks to pass it back to us within Q4 of this year. Right. And we will analyze the returns and release a report in the first half of next year. And that report hopefully can also lay out whether there are areas that we may be a bit short in terms of pushing what we can do to help with that. Are there ambiguities in, for example, regulatory guidelines, or even are there barriers in terms of regulations, or whether it's simply a matter of not having the technical know-how? In that case, we can talk to Science Park or S3 to see whether they can help. So the outcome of that survey is important in defining what areas we want to work further on. And it will be in the form of a questionnaire that will ask you to take your current position and also give us the key highlights of your 3-year plan. And that will be a start for the All Banks Go FinTech initiative.
Beginning of the journey.
Right.
I'd reiterate, Eddie, the industry is keen to support the HKMA's initiatives to reinforce Hong Kong's international lead in financial infrastructure. I certainly agree the tech baseline assessment will be a crucial step to harness the data for the HKMA to consider and design further actions in order to raise the level of technological sophistication of Hong Kong banking sector. And we look forward to the release of further details, actually very shortly in July, you mentioned. Now, you also briefly touched on Regtech earlier. Yes. So let's dive deeper into this. HKMA introduced a 2-year roadmap for Regtech adoption since last November. How has the adoption landscape evolved since then? And what can we do to build out the Regtech ecosystem here in Hong Kong?
Well, the Regtech 2-year roadmap was introduced just half a year ago. But we are very glad to see that there's already growing interest among the banking community about the use, the adoption of Regtech, what can be done, etc. And I still think that for the initial stage, the most important thing is to raise the awareness of all banks about Regtech. That's quite important. And let me do some marketing here, using this opportunity. On the 30th of June, the HKMA will host a Regtech virtual conference called Unlocking the Power of Regtech. And we will invite different people, financial institutions, Regtech providers, different central banks, regulators, to talk about the potential use of Regtech and their own experience. And these include people like the Deputy Governor of the People's Bank of China, and also the global CEO of Citibank, etc. So I really hope that you can all check your diary and see if you're free on 30th of June. And if not, if you're free, then register. We're still open for registration. At the same time, we have earlier hosted a global tech challenge where we invite global Regtech firms to submit different proposals to really solve the real life problem that banks in Hong Kong face. And we've got very good response from the global Regtech community with a lot of submissions. And the result of that, the winner of that global tech challenge will be announced in the conference on the 30th of June. And on the other hand, we are also working on other activities. For example, our banking supervision colleagues are working out what they call the Regtech adoption practice guides. It's a series of different guidelines to let banks know about our expectations about Regtech adoption. And I think that will also help create the kind of knowledge base for the banks as they go along that journey. So, skills, how to close the skills gap in Regtech is another area that we're working on. So we are, again, tackling it on different levels: awareness, providing guidance, training people, and see whether we can have a much wider Regtech adoption from here.
Thank you, Eddie. Now let's move to a different but related hot topic. I must say, even before you entered, after your announcement, I was already checking some media headlines and hot topics there. Central bank digital currency, or commonly referred to as CBDC. What's your vision towards CBDC, and how can the banking industry benefit from CBDC developments at the wholesale as well as retail level? I think you briefly touched on that, but if you would please elaborate.
Right. Well, we do believe that CBDC, central bank digital currency, is probably one of the most important topics that you should really look at, that will keep coming in the months or even years to come. We've been looking at CBDCs for some 3-4 years now, starting with the wholesale application of CBDC, trying to see whether we can use that to solve the very long-standing pain point of cross-border payment, which is costly, less, not efficient, takes time. We want to see whether if we've got a direct link of CBDC between two central banks, it can be much faster. We did an experiment with Bank of Thailand, and that pilot has now included PBOC and also UAE Central Bank. It's going on, and we do hope that one day after the completion of the pilot, probably towards the end of the year, we can think about commercialization and get it on the ground and use it. So I'm quite hopeful that wholesale CBDC will probably be implemented in some form in the years to come. Retail CBDC is a lot more complex. We've just started a project that I talk about with the BIS on the technical aspects, but it's really a lot more than the technical aspects. The technical aspects is about how to tokenize banknotes or currency, what should be the architectural design. But the policy issues is a lot more difficult than this. The policy issues will involve, one, you have a great retail payment landscape. Do you really need our CBDC to complete the landscape? Are there really use cases that you will find it beneficial to use CBDC for retail use? How to balance the need for privacy of the general public against the need for traceability for AML KYC purposes? How to ensure that if you tokenize your currency, how to ensure that the resilience is there? How to ensure that the cybersecurity issues can be adequately addressed? What's the kind of impact of having a CBDC not only on the banking sector, but also on monetary transmission? So these are all very complex issues. So what we intend to do is to get the technical stream and the policy stream going in parallel. And we will study them in the next 12 months, hopefully to get some kind of initial thoughts on the matter so that we can communicate with the banking sector and with the public. But we can't guarantee. One, I need to say that it's a complex matter. One, I want to say that we have not yet decided whether to launch the RCBDC or e-Hong Kong dollar. And secondly, it takes time and really a lot of analysis to see, to think about all these policy issues. And after 12 months, we may have some initial thoughts, but it's still very far from having a decision or conclusion. I think the same is happening for central banks around the world who are all thinking about RCBDC at this point in time.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's definitely a very complex matter, and it certainly warrants more consideration and thoughts in terms of the technical use cases, the practical use cases, as well as what it means in terms of the whole monetary system, as well as consumer protection. So one final question from me before we move to Q&A from the audience. Banking is probably the most data-intensive industry in the world. With changing customer expectations and business model, there is a need to modernize our data infrastructure. You also mentioned that as one of the core pillars of work. How is data going to shape the future of fintech? And how will banks benefit from the introduction of next-gen data infrastructure?
Well, I mentioned earlier that data will be at the heart of our next fintech journey. And we want to build infrastructure to accelerate the adoption of innovative products. In fact, there's one interesting survey that we just did, and the results show that 72% of the survey banks in Hong Kong rank the lack of a common infrastructure to connect different data sources as the biggest barrier for them to use alternative data. So without this common platform, it's extremely hard for banks to pick up scattered data that is going around in the different digital platforms. So what we intend to do is to just do this, aggregate different data onto one platform with the consent of the data subject. The banks can actually just pick up the data through a one platform. And in future, banks will not have to do bilateral negotiation with different data providers. You can actually do it all through this platform, which can be plugged in by different data providers. So everything will be all the more easier for banks. And for customers, I can imagine that in future, even for freelance workers who do not have an income statement, if they allow their own digital footprint to be vetted by the banks might actually be able to use these alternative data instead of the income statement to grant certain credit lines to the freelance operator, or what people call the slashes. And for SMEs, probably again with their own digital footprint given to the banks, there may be no need for using properties or real estate as collateral for some of their borrowing, which will make it easier for them to borrow. So I think for banks, for the SMEs, for the general public, and of course also for the fintech innovation firms, it will be a win-win-win-win for everybody if we can get the data platform a lot more organized and a lot more efficient than now.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you. Certainly echo your views that the vision is grand. It carries with it not only the complexities and considerations, but also from a consumer protection perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective, very, very wide topics to explore. But we're very happy, HKAB, as well as member banks involved, to continue the dialogue and to help accelerate the pace. Thank you, Eddie. Now I can see there are very, very many questions from the audience via webcast. So shall we now address some of these? Where there are recurring topics in the questions, I will try to regroup them so that they group under different themes and we can address as many as possible in the next 15 minutes. Yeah. So the first question is about talents. You also mentioned that shortage of local fintech talent supply is a common barrier to fintech adoption and developments. Could you please share with us the HKMA's policies or support initiatives in this area, please?
Now, we are tackling this through two areas. One is to really groom and help the students to get some form of real-life practical experience before they get into the banking sector. One, of course, is that the universities have to train the right graduates with the right skills. And this is something that we are actually talking to different universities to make sure that they have enough pipeline for fintech talents, fintech graduates, or importantly, graduates in data science. And also we want these graduates to be able to get some practical experience. And that's why we have this FCAS with some apprenticeship opportunities with banks. And in future, we've also, actually, we have just started to experiment one new scheme that I mentioned is the industry project new network scheme. And here we're actually asking some of the more famous university professors to work together with the students and some bank practitioners to solve some real life difficult issues so that they actually have some real experience to problem solve before they join the banking sector. So that's with the graduates and students. And we are also very focused on the current banking practitioners. We're tackling that at different levels. As you are aware, the Academy of Finance has just launched their first, what we call the FinTech Masterclass, so that senior executive, well, I have to say that senior executives do not automatically know FinTech. They have to learn as well. So this masterclass is great.
Quite often the opposite, actually.
Yes. and this masterclass is great. It gives an opportunity for the different industry practitioners and also some of the professors to talk about fintech and the applications. And once the senior executive buy in, they will trickle down into their workforce. So management, but for the other practitioners, we will also soon be introducing the enhanced competency framework on fintech, which will include both fintech and also Regtech. I hope it will be introduced later this year so that bank practitioners can actually take the courses, complete the framework, and be a bit more equipped in the fintech areas. But talent is, again, what we need to differentiate our economy and also our ability to get fintech really off, as you said, continuing to be at the forefront of the global fintech scene.
Thank you, Eddie. I certainly echo your thought. The curriculum at universities certainly could do with refreshing and constant, actually, reinvigoration, if you would. But likewise, for the industry, we shouldn't take it for granted that practitioners already are well apted with technology. Even if we also need to progress in advance.
Right.
And I think the applications you mentioned between students and practitioners actually would be very important.
Right.
Tasting and testing the waters, if you would. Now we have a follow-up question on talents. All global fintech hubs actually have been scrambling for fintech talents. From the HKMA perspective, how could Hong Kong stand out as being more appealing to these professionals or professionals to be?
Well, I think there are two things that are important as we speak to both the universities and also the industry people, especially some of the fintech startup firms. Demand is extremely important. There's got to be demand for fintech solutions so that you will attract the fintech talents, whether it's local or even overseas, to be in Hong Kong to deliver the fintech solutions to those who are in demand of these solutions. And that's why our first initiative, All Banks Go Fintech, will actually help in this. That will inevitably generate a lot of demand from different banks, large or small, for fintech solutions. And hopefully, that will provide an opportunity for the young guys to say that, hey, either whether I'm joining a bank, I won't be actually trapped in the IT maintenance section, but I will be involved in interesting fintech solutions in the bank. Or if they think about having a startup, they will know that their creative, innovative product might have a market in Hong Kong. And even better, if we, with some success in Hong Kong, if in future, if we can help them get into, for example, Greater Bay Area, that will be even much better because the market will be a lot bigger. So that's one thing. The other thing is the FinTech Supervisory Sandbox that we talk about. We need to give them an environment where they can experiment and pilot. Not only that, apart from the environment to pilot or given the regulatory advice or guidance, if they can be given funding in the same sandbox, it will actually be very, very encouraging and useful to them, especially the very small startup. And if you've got that sort of from front to end, including funding parts available in the sandbox, I'm sure that whether it's local or even overseas talents, they will be very attracted to the fintech ecosystem here.
Thank you. That certainly helps remove some of the barriers and give people a bit more confidence to try out their new creative ideas. Now, a final thought from our audience, Eddie. What do you think is the most crucial element to the successful implementation of the FinTech 2025 strategy?
Well, I think one important element is collaboration. It's really not just about banks. It's about Hong Kong MA as a regulator, whether we can provide the right support environment, the right policy guidance, the clear guidelines, the sandbox, etc. Of course, it's about banks wanting to adopt technology. But at the same time, it's also about other fintech providers, whether you're talking about data providers or the firms that will help us in getting the platform together, data platform together, or whether it's the universities providing fintech talents, or even providing support in terms of the utilities package that I talk about, or the science park or cyberport. So there's a lot of players and stakeholders in the whole fintech ecosystem. And in order to get the FinTech 2025 off the ground and delivering good results, I thought the collaboration between all these stakeholders is extremely important. And that's actually one reason why we will be establishing a forum that aims to bring together the government in terms of not only us, but also the Innovation and Technology Bureau, the Science Park, Cyberport, banks, as well as academia, industry people together, so that we can sort of communicate on what more needs to be done, what support factors are needed, or how we can better market Hong Kong as a fintech center to the global scene. And I think that kind of collaboration probably to me is the centerpiece of the factors of success for this strategy.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for sharing your insights this afternoon. I am sure our audience actually has gotten a lot and to hear from you firsthand and directly. I'm a strong believer of the benefits to broaden the use of fintech in the post-pandemic era, especially. The FinTech 2025 strategy encapsulates how the industry could work with stakeholders as well as partners toward delivering fair and efficient financial services for our customers and the Hong Kong economy. It is still early days for this ambition, fair to say, but it already promises countless opportunities. For the FinTech 2025 strategy to be successful, we will need active and open dialogues amongst banks, technology partners, and our regulatory authorities. HKAB will definitely continue to facilitate these conversations and play an active role in them. And this brings us to a close of today's session. Thank you, Eddie, and a big thank you to our audience who joined us today. Keep well, and we'll keep the dialogue going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie and Diana, for wonderful sharing. Sorry that we don't have time to take any more questions. We really appreciate everyone who has raised questions, and we apologize to those of you whose questions we didn't get to. We've come to the end of today's program. So thank you again for making time to join us today, and we hope you enjoyed the event. Wish you all a pleasant evening. Goodbye.